Welcome. It's the Close the Deal show. I'm your host, Terrence McCray. Every week we bring you business information, tips, and insights from entrepreneur, business professionals, and inspired individuals from the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond. The Close the Deal show also features public announcements, Entrepreneur Week, as well as nonprofit organizations and small business owners. And if you're looking for strategies to help you in your business or educate the public, then you're in the right place. Thank you for joining us today. Historically, throughout the United States, there has always been some form of a problem in America. And one in particular that has touched home for the last 50 years. It's been an issue dealing with homelessness as companies increase in revenue, as the world increase in population. Also, there becomes another problem that is increasing. It is people not having a place to stay. We all know that homelessness deals with a lot of issues regarding drug use, mental health, criminal activity, and someone having a lack of wages to be able to afford affordable housing. And today we have Mrs. Paola Laverde, not only a very, very heartwarming woman who is taking it upon herself to make it clear in how she wants to make a difference in the world through a social impact. But she's taking it upon herself to understand the problems happening in the Bay Area regarding housing. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Close the Deal show, you're going to learn some new strategies and you're going to gain some insight from this wonderful woman who is advocating for homelessness, dealing with housing, and for people who are suffering from housing issues right here in the Bay Area. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest, Mrs. Paola Laverde.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be here, Terrence. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on the Close the Deal show. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. It is truly wonderful to have you. So, what is your occupation?
Presently, I'll talk about I am an elected official for the city of Berkeley. I'm a rent board commissioner, and City of Berkeley has rent control, and there is a 9-member board that oversees Berkeley's rent stabilization and eviction for good cause ordinance. And so I'm one of the members on that board. There's 9 of us right now. Actually, presently, I am running for office. So when your viewers see this, I may or may not have been elected back into the position as a rent board commissioner for the city of Berkeley.
So, when you say you're running for office, what brought about that movement for you to run for office?
So, good question. I have been evicted twice through no fault of my own. The first time I was evicted out of San Francisco, and I moved into an apartment with my then fiance. And about 3 years later, I moved into a fourplex with him. 3 years later, when I was pregnant, new property owners came in and basically harassed us out, and they made living in the apartment very, very challenging, very noisy, and we had to leave because they would not talk to us. They would not deal with us. Although they were doing construction all around us, they would not even offer us to relocate us while they did the rehab for the building. So those are my experiences as a renter. So there was an opportunity. There was a seat coming open on the rent board, and some community leaders asked me to run because I have a background I've been an activist. I've a background in broadcast journalism. After I left broadcasting, I started doing more activism in my journalism and my reporting. I did video production to help nonprofits, the WIC program to be able to promote their programs. I've also been an interpreter in the courts. And so my eyes have been open to how the system works, how it is that if you don't have money, if you don't have the power establishment backing you, how you're basically you're going to face a very hard time being able to make it. That's my background. I was asked to run for office, and I was fortunate enough to be elected by the people of Berkeley. And so now I'm running for office again because there's so much that needs to be done right now. There's a Proposition 10 on the ballot that would actually allow communities to be able to decide if they want to regulate the rental housing industry. Right now, current state law says you can't. And if you were to try to regulate, to establish some rent control, the only buildings that could be rent stabilized is anything built before 1995. In San Francisco and in Berkeley and Oakland, that the cities that already have rent control, their law started in 1979 and 1980, and current state law says that only buildings built before 1979 or 1980 can be rent stabilized. And that's why we're seeing such a huge increase in homelessness. It's not that we've had an explosion of drug addicted people or that we've had much more mentally ill people. It's that we have a lot of people who cannot afford to pay the rents. Because if you're living in an apartment or in a single family home, current state law says a single family home cannot be rent stabilized. So if you're living in a single family home and your landlord says, okay, your lease is up, I'm going to raise the rent $500 a month. If your rent's really low, or people usually don't get $500 a month pay increases. So we're seeing a lot of people in Northern California, especially in Southern California as well, where they cannot afford the rent, and so we have more homeless people.
So what are some strategic ways that a housing advocate partner with other organizations in order to get the message out?
Well, it's very important for people to know what their rights and their responsibilities are. So there are several organizations. I can mention a couple. There's a Housing Advocates in San Francisco. The Housing Rights Committee is an organization that people can join, and they can help you. If you have some issues with your landlords, you can go to them. You have the SF Housing Action, also another community organization that's there to help people and connect them with services, maybe helping them find out other resources. Also, there's the SF San Francisco Human Rights Commission actually has a resource page for housing. In Oakland, we have the East Bay Housing Organization, which is also known as EBHO, and these organizations that can help people possibly find other housing. The issue is, though, that housing right now, this is an industry that is unregulated, and state law mandates has say. So if you are living in an unregulated unit, there's very little you can do. So that's why it's so important for people to join organizations such as in Oakland, Just Cause, Causa Justa, that's been fighting for workers' right, for renters' rights. There's the East Bay, the Oakland Tenants Union. There's a Berkely Tenants Union. There's a San Francisco Tenants Union. Organizations that help people unionize to fight for their rights. Because right now we have very little rights if you're a renter in a location that doesn't have any rent control.
Okay, so could you share with the viewers of San Francisco how, say for instance, you've advocated in Berkeley, right? How could someone that doesn't live in Berkeley learn more about how to find out what their rights are in the areas that they can go to? Because you have a lot of facilities and a lot of places outside of San Francisco and Berkeley, but say for someone in East Palo Alto or Richmond or Hayward or Pittsburgh who watches this show, how could they obtain and reach out to a main location that deals with housing?
Well, I can tell you that the city of Richmond does have rent control. Actually, the city of Richmond got rent control in 2016. First city to get rent control in 30 years in California. I would recommend people reach out to organizations such as Tenants Together. They're actually based in San Francisco, and Tenants Together is an effort to spread and let people know what their rights are. It's really important for people, let's say in East Palo Alto, to find out what their community is doing regarding rent control. They can reach out to their city council member, to a local housing organization. You can Google housing advocates in East Palo Alto, and look to see what organizations are there in their community, because each community is different. So like I said, in Berkeley we have rent control, in Richmond we have rent control, in San Francisco and Oakland we have rent control. But those other little communities, and if Proposition 10 passes, which is the Affordable Housing Act, that is on the ballot right now. When your viewers see this, we'll find out if that law has passed or not. If it passes, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it has passed.
Why do you wish for it to pass?
Because It will undo current state law. Current state law says that communities or communities cannot impose rent control, and if they impose rent control, they can only impose rent control from for buildings built before 1995, because current state law was established in 1995. It is called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, and that law passed in 1995. And that law says three things. It says communities cannot establish rent control. It says that single-family homes and condominiums that are being rented cannot have the rent stabilized. And it says that when units are vacant, the landlord can raise a rent to as high as the market will bear. So there are efforts right now across the state. I believe there are 15 cities across the state that are looking to establish rent control right now. If Prop 10 passes, then all these new cities are going to establish rent control with their different laws, because each community will have a right to decide how they're going to regulate the rental housing industry in their city. For example, National City is looking at rent control, and Long Beach is looking at rent control, and I'm not sure what other cities may. I believe Mountain View and some other cities here in the Bay Area are fighting to see if they're going to have rent control, but or they have it on the ballot. So it's important for your viewers that are seeing this to look into their local community to see if that was an issue on the ballot, and if not. 2 years from now, in 2020, they could see what they can be doing to put that issue on the ballot. Because the only way that we as citizens can take action when our government isn't, giving us what we need, is for us to get involved. Get involved with tenants together. Get involved with a local tenants union in your community. Oakland has the Oakland Tenants Union. Berkeley has a tenants union, but tenants together is a big statewide effort.
Well, what if you don't personally suffer from being homeless or having a housing problem? How could you still do some good? How could you pay it forward? How could someone that's not dealing with this problem still make a contribution and create a social impact?
You may live in a community, you may be in your house, you're set, but the homeless people affect you because, they're in your community. You're seeing their pain. You're seeing their issues. So you need to get involved. You need to get involved to promote efforts and programs that help deal with this issue. Example, I can talk about, in Berkeley, we have Proposition O, which would raise money for affordable housing. So one of the issues that we're having in the state of California is, first of all, there's not enough housing. And then what housing that does exist, it's unaffordable. We have in Berkeley, we have a vacancy rate of 4%. We have empty apartment units that aren't being rented. Why? I'm assuming it's because the rents are too high. And so as a business owner, you can, write that off as a loss. But that's potential housing. So if the owners of rental housing don't want to rent their units at an affordable price, then our government needs to raise money to be able to build affordable housing, to be able to house people who cannot afford the present market rates. And the present market rates are astronomical. People are not making enough money to be able to afford these rental prices that are right now that we're dealing with.
So what do you find to be some solutions for people who are suffering from housing problems?
Housing problems. Well, they could ask for raises at work. They could ask for a raise. They can get another job to be able to afford the rent that they're experiencing. Because, how are you going to make it? And we know a lot of people are we have strikes in San Francisco right now, the Marriott workers. They're saying, one job should be enough. One job should be enough. And unfortunately, it's not enough. It's not enough. The way the system is set up, it's not enough. So people have to be working extra jobs. They have to be cutting back on all their, cutting back, cut. Forget going to the beauty salon, forget getting your nails done, because you have to save money to pay rent. Bring in a roommate if you can afford that, if you have space. People are doing that right now. I can tell you that because Berkeley has a university there, there are students, houses that are for rent that you have every room in the house is used as a bedroom. So people are sleeping in the living room, people are sleeping in the dining room, they're sleeping in all the other rooms in the house to be able to afford the rents. So I think pester your local public officials, your city council members to demand that you want affordable housing.
Do you see the housing issue being a problem in 2022? Because that's not far away.
Oh yes, definitely, definitely. Even if the bond measures that are on the state and local measures to build affordable housing, it's going to take a while for buildings to get built. So we're going to have this problem for a long, long time. So that's why it's so important for us to be able to stabilize rents for communities to be able to decide that there has to be a cap. If there is an apartment going for $3,000, a studio apartment going for $3,000, there's no reason why that studio apartment should be going for $3,500 the next time the lease goes up. Who can afford that? So we need some stabilization in the rents to keep people in place. And for the homeless people, we don't only have homeless people, sleeping in tents. We have homeless people sleeping in cars. We have homeless people who are couch surfing. And what this also causes is that people are forced to leave the area where they're living and have to commute farther. And I hear this. I hear a lot of people saying, well, if you can't afford to leave here, just move. But really, I work in Oakland. Okay, so, and I know people who work in my building who are commuting from Fairfield, who are commuting from Tracy to be able to get to work because they probably have a good paying job. But the rents are so high, you can't afford to live here. So it's just like, it's a hard solution. It's a hard solution, but I do believe that if we demand from our leaders, our elected officials to do something, call your congressperson in your local assembly member who represents you in Sacramento. Call your state senator who represents you in Sacramento and demand that you want something. You need affordable housing. That's why they're there for. As an elected official, people come to me. I mean, I know what I can and I know what I cannot do. But I do believe that if your voice is heard, if you let your voice heard, people will hear you and something will happen.
So, my question to you is, you're on the ballot in Berkeley.
Yes.
As a housing advocate?
Yes.
For the rent board?
Yes.
Okay. If you had the opportunity to tell someone why you should be elected in this position, what would it be?
Well, I firmly believe that Berkeley's rent stabilization and eviction for good cause ordinance should be upheld because that is the law. I want to spread those protections to more tenants. And also, very importantly, I want to make sure that all tenants and all landlords know their rights and their responsibilities under the law.
How do you plan to spread that message?
I have been knocking on doors. I've actually taken off several days. I mean, every weekend I've been now walking canvassing, talking to people in the streets. I'm one of those people who will stand outside of Trader Joe's and say, hey, have you registered to vote yet? Are you a Berkeley renter? This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is why. And I have some great conversations with people. I've had people tell me, Berkeley's rent board is not relevant anymore. I'm like, what do you mean it's not relevant?
But are you just doing it for votes? Are you going to still continue to do what you do outside of just campaigning?
Oh, yes. I'm one of those people. I believe in doing outreach. I believe that the more people know about their rights and their responsibilities, the more they understand what they need to do. If you don't know what your right is, or you don't know what your responsibility is, you're likely to go afoul somehow. Either, let's say you're a landlord, you don't know what your responsibilities are, and you do something that violates the tenant's right. The tenant may not be aware that their rights are being violated, and okay, it's a standoff. I mean, it's nothing's happening. But the second the tenant realizes their rights are being violated, they can go to the rent board and complain, and then also the landlord has to deal with the issue. So it's very important for people to know their rights and responsibilities. So this is something I do all the time. On my day job, I also do outreach. I do outreach, and I'm always talking to people about rights and responsibilities. I work for the state of California. I work for the Department of Industrial Relations. And so there are a lot of rights, labor rights that people, don't know, and a lot of labor rights that employers choose not to know. So it's always important to make sure that people know what their rights and responsibilities are.
Well, I want to thank you not only for sharing your insight and your strategic ways for people to come to understand their housing rights, but I also want to thank you for your honesty.
Oh,
Because that's what we're looking for on the Close the Deal show. Because when we do business, we want to know exactly who we doing business with.
Yes.
So, to the viewers and voters of Berkely, in the Bay Area and beyond, let's vote for Mrs. Paola Laverde, okay? And let's reassure her that once she gets in office, we still want answers, and we still want her to be able to share her knowledge and information. Thank you for coming on the Close the Deal show.
Thank you for having me, Terrence.
Pleasure in having you. Before we close this deal, we would love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions or questions, or even want to apply to be a guest on the Close the Deal show, you can contact us at www.theclosethedealshow.com. San Francisco Bay Area viewers, you can find us every Monday night at 8:30 p.m. on cable Comcast channel 29 or online BAVCSF Comment channel 29 around the world. Live shows are every second and fourth Wednesday of the month on cable Comcast channel 76. Worldwide, the Close the Deal show, you can find us on YouTube. Just type my name, Terrence McCray, click my picture. Please subscribe, comment on your favorite episode. Take good care, everyone. Don't forget, find the right connection and close the deal.